Jungkook sat in his study. His jaw was clenched, eyes narrowed, as he flipped through each page with growing frustration. The deal he was working on for months had fallen apart. Months of hard work and endless negotiations wasted. With a deep exhale, he tossed a document onto the pile, fingers rubbing at his temple. Unaware of his mood, Vine entered the room with a gentle smile, holding a vase in her hand. She had shaped and painted it herself, pouring her heart into the small creation for so many days. She knew Jungkook had been under a lot of stress lately, and she wanted to cheer him up with this little surprise. Jungkook, she called softly, walking over to him. He didn't look up. She took a step closer, her smile fading a bit as she noticed his tense shoulders. Fine. Look, I made something for you. Jungkook, I don't have time, Vine. I'll look at it later. He continued to ruffle through his papers, muttering to himself. Vine bit her lip and said, At least have a look. It took me a lot of days to. Just as she stepped closer to his desk, her elbow knocked against his arm, and the vase slipped from her hand. Water splashed over the desk, drenching his papers he had been so fiercely protecting. Jungkook stood up, filled with shock and fury. Vine, he snapped, glaring down at the soaked documents. Jungkook, do you realize what you have done? Do you think this is a game to you? Vine's mouth opened in a gasp, her hands clutching the vase tightly. Vine, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Jungkook, of course you didn't mean to. But you never think, do you? This isn't just some random pile of papers. This is my work. The months of hard work. He bit out, running a hand through his hair in frustration. Jungkook, just go away, please. The sting of his words hit her harder than she expected, and her face grew hot with both guilt and anger. She felt her chest tighten. She had only wanted to bring him a little bit of joy, but now her stomach was aching with the stress of his reaction. Not trusting herself to say anything else, Vine pressed her lips together and turned on her heel, walking weakly to their bedroom. Once inside, she closed the door and leaned against it, taking deep breaths. But it was no use. Her stomach twisted, her body throbbing with the pain she had been ignoring all day, but increased now by her raw emotions. Jungkook sat back in his chair, watching her retreat. The moment the door clicked shut, a pang of regret twisted his chest. He ran a hand over his face, sighing heavily. She had only tried to brighten his day, and he had lashed out without a second thought. With a shake of his head, he pushed his papers aside, because they suddenly felt so unimportant. After a few minutes, he walked to their bedroom and knocked softly. No answer. He turned the handle and stepped inside to find her lying on the bed, curled up with a strained expression on her face, her hand pressed against her stomach. His eyes narrowed as he asked, Vine, are you all right? She looked up, her expression caught between pain and hurt. She nodded, trying to hide the discomfort in her voice. Jungkook's heart sank even further. Jungkook, I'm sorry, Vine. I was out of line. I shouldn't have spoken to you that way. He lowered himself onto the bed beside her, hesitatingly reaching for her hand. She closed her eyes, her voice quieter than before. Vine, I was only trying to help, Jungkook. I know you're stressed, but I didn't think. He leaned closer, pressing a gentle kiss to her forehead. Jungkook, I know. I should have been grateful. I am grateful. It's beautiful, and I was too stubborn to see that. Vine looked at him and said, It's fine. You don't need to be so formal. It's no one's mistake. But I thought you deserved some rest too. That's why I came to you. And I'm so happy that you are finally out of your study room, even if for some minutes. Jungkook pulled her into his arms, holding her close. Jungkook, you're the best thing in my life, Vine. I'm sorry I forgot that for a moment. And with a sigh, she let herself sink into his embrace, trying to forget the pain she was suffering from moments ago. But then a tingle so hard raised in her stomach, making her groan. Jungkook looked at her, confused. You're okay, right? Vine closed her eyes in pain and she said, These cramps, it's hurting a lot. She turned to another side and then again after a few seconds. Jungkook, what should I do? I don't know. But she only groaned in return. Jungkook, wait here, okay? I'll get you something to help with the pain. Vine nodded weakly. Her lips pressed into a thin line as she tried to breathe through the cramps. Jungkook left the room and returned a few minutes later with a glass of warm water, a heating pad, and some medicine. Here, he murmured, sitting down beside her again. He handed her the medicine first, watching with careful eyes as she took it. She took a sip of water, her hands trembling a bit as the pain flared up again. He placed the heating pad gently over her stomach, adjusting it until she sighed with relief at the warmth. Vine smiled faintly, saying, Thank you. This is really soothing. Jungkook, thank God. You should have told me before. I'll sit with you as long as you need, okay? He slid onto the bed beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders and pulling her close. She nestled into him, her head resting against his chest as he gently stroked her hair, his fingers moving soothingly through her soft locks. His eyes fell on the vase that rested on the table in front of him. He just noticed that it was so beautiful. He looked at Vine and said, Jungkook, you have some extraordinary talent. We could start a side business of vases here. She chuckled. Jungkook, I'm serious. We can make it big. I can handle the advertising. You just do the creative stuff. Vine rolled her eyes and said, Oh, please. You barely noticed the vase until I practically shoved it in your face. Jungkook, I noticed it, just a little late. He cleared his throat. But I'm fully on board now. We can call it Wine and Cookies Extraordinary Vases. What do you think? Wine laughed. Extraordinary? You do realize it was my first try, right? It's not exactly extraordinary. Jungkook, I beg to differ. I mean, who else could make something that could literally douse my stress? It's multifunctional, vase and stress reliever. Genius. Shaking her head, she laughed. You're impossible, you know that? Jungkook, you can't escape the work by saying that. So are you in or not? We could be the next big thing. Fine. Alright, I'll join in on one condition. Jungkook, what? Fine. You're in charge of cleanup if any more water spills, including stress papers. Jungkook laughed. Fair deal. Vine shook his hand like it's an official contract and he pulled her hand to kiss her. Jungkook, we're going to be the next trillionaires. They both burst out laughing. The weight of the day finally melted away. Jungkook playfully pulled her closer, shaking his head as he looked down at her. Jungkook smiled softly. You do make me smile every day. I just lost sight of that for a moment. You know I love you, right? Vine murmured against his chest. I love you too. Thanks for being here even when you're so busy. Jungkook, nothing compares to you. He leaned down and kissed her forehead again, his heart swelling as he held her close. The gentle rise and fall of her breathing relaxed him, and he realized he hadn't felt this at ease in days.